Today, we're going to continue the series of looking at WordPress alternatives. And one of the main alternatives is Webflow. But you may not want to use Webflow, but you may like the actual overall workflow. Lots of flows going on in there. In this case, you may want to check out WebStudio, which is from an ex-employee of Webflow. So there's going to be a similarity in the work process here. So one of the key things here is that you can work online in your browser, but you can also download a copy of WebStudio and install that on your local machine. So you have that ability to work sort of offline, but you can still connect up between the two different platforms, the online version and the local version, which is pretty neat. Now, one of the key things that I think is very important when it comes to WebStudio and why you may want to take a look at this seriously is the fact that this is actively developed and also quite quickly being developed. New features are rolling out regularly, and some of these new features are quite considerable big features. For example, very recently, over the last week or so, CSS variables have been included. So if you like to work with CSS variables in a kind of framework, this is going to give you the option to use that same kind of workflow, which is obviously a very good thing. You've also got the option then you can integrate this with a Craft, which is a kind of open source framework for working with a design system. So you can sort of leverage the power of that, which a lot of the work's already been done for things like your color schemes and all your spacing and your sizing and so on. So the development process should be considerably quicker than starting from scratch. Worth checking out. Link to all this information is down in the details below. Okay, so let's take a quick look. You can see this gives us marketing options, dynamic collections, a CMS, and coming soon we have e-commerce. So if you want to have an e-commerce store, I don't know what the kind of complexity we're going to have here, whether it's going to be quite simplistic or whether we're going to have a fully featured kind of WooCommerce alternative or Shopify alternative. It'll be interesting to see what this is like when it rolls out. There's the ability to integrate with various different platforms, things like Ghost, Airtable, Drupal, and so on. So you may want to have your content being created in something like Airtable or Notion, then you can connect it up to this and you can benefit from having that data pulled in and being included in your website. You're sort of your typical kind of CMS type thing, but using an external service to actually create the content. That's interesting. These are all things that I want to take a look at when I really get stuck into this and get a better feeling for what it can do. But if you'd like me to create some content on how you can use this to get started and so on, let me know in the comment section down below. And if enough are interested, I'll take a look at creating some more content on it. But for me, I like what this is doing so far. It's a very promising project. But let's jump in the editor and take a quick look at some of the options that are available in there. So this is the editor proper. And as you can see, I've got a template or basic starting point already loaded in so we can see what options we have. So if we take a quick look over things, you've got your navigation down the left hand side. So you want to add in new elements or components or widgets or whatever you want to call them. There's a bunch inside here. Again, if you're coming from Webflow, if you test that out, actually if you come from any kind of page builder, WordPress and so on, a lot of these options are going to be very, very familiar. So transitioning over shouldn't be too difficult. But as you can see, we've got things like data from webhooks, time and so on. But you also got your basics like your box, your link, your list and all those kinds of things. You can then come in and you can add in or access any of your pages. You've then got a sort of structure or navigator panel, which again is very familiar if you've used something like Webflow or Elementor, Bricks and so on. You've got your sort of assets panel then, which is all the various assets you've got uploaded you can access and you can upload directly from here. And obviously these are stored up in the cloud or you can have them local as well. Then finally, you've got your sort of templates, which at this point in time, there's only a handful of templates here, but you've got sections, you've got pages, and you've got various different integrations then with, like I say, with Notion. You can even integrate it with WordPress, which is interesting, Airtable, Base Row, and so on. So there's ways of pulling your data into this. Down the bottom then, you've also got AI, which is part of this now, which we're not going to take a look at. And you've got your help and your learn. Then the main section over on the right hand side is where all of the options are for whatever you have selected. So for example, if we choose this hero section, you can see we've got all the various different layout options. You can see it's using Flexbox, all your margins, your spacing. This is very, very familiar to what you see if you've used something like Webflow, but it still works in the same way as Elementor, Bricks, those kinds of things. And your various different options then for your overflow, your fit, your positions, your typography settings, shadows, box shadows, transitions, and so on. You get the idea of what's inside here. You'll also notice at the top the style sources. Now these are basically variables, CSS variables, which you can access. You can create your own as well. And if you use, like I say, that Craft kind of framework, you'll have loads of these pre-built and pre-designed for you, which you can then immediately start using. However, if we come over to the global route on the left-hand side and scroll right the way to the bottom into advanced, this is where all of those CSS variables actually reside. So we can see any of these, and if we want to make changes, we can make changes inside here to any of the values. And the nice thing to see is it's using calc and clamp and so on to make sure that we've got scalable and we've got flexible and all those kinds of things. If you want to add your own in, simply click on the plus, give it a name. Make sure you start off with these sort of two dashes. Give it a name and so on. And then when you want to reference it, you can simply come up to the style sources, for example. So we choose our heading. You can come up here and you just simply start typing in. And you'll see this will pull up any of the relevant information. So if we select something like that, it would apply whatever is relevant. That's the color kind of thing. You get the idea. And depending on what you select, you can see there's already a bunch of different styles have been applied to this. On the left-hand side, you can also see we've got the CSS preview, so we can see all the CSS that's being applied in the various different parts of the design. In this case, our image. If we come up to the text at the top, you can see all the information is inside this. We can see exactly what's going on. And your entire structure here, so you can enable this, disable it, you can show it, you get the idea of what this does. Then if you come into your settings, all the options inside here for handling the various different settings for whatever you choose. So we choose an image. You'll see we get different settings. We can choose the name, whether we want to show it or hide it. You can see we can set ID, classes, the source where this comes from, the width, the type of loading, whether we want to optimize this directly, data variables, which is something a little bit beyond what I want to cover in this. You've also got your breakpoints, so you can see what this will look like on the various different breakpoints to make sure that it's totally set up correctly. All pretty cool. If you want to jump into a preview to get rid of the editor itself, you can click the little play button at the top. And now we have the sort of preview. Stop that. You can share this if you want to. So if you want to share this as a link so someone else can see it. So if you're working with a client, for example, you can share this link. Job done. They can take a look at it. All pretty cool. And finally, you can go to publish and you can publish this to a domain or you can export this. And one of the cool things about this is you can actually export as static HTML. So if you want to create this inside here and output this as a static website, you can do that from here. If we choose the export, for example, you can see build and download a static site. Follow the instructions, hit the build and download, and you'll get a static version, which you can then upload to whatever hosting you want. So you could use this as a kind of rapid development design environment, and then you could output this and you could use this on any kind of hosting you want, not limited to any specific hosting or only using it on WebStudio. Now, there's other things you can do here as well. There's a lot of other really useful features. If we come back to the actual website itself, you can see we've got the builder, we've got the CMS, SEO and so on, accessibility. But you'll also notice we can paste from Webflow. So if you set up a site inside Webflow, you can copy and paste that over. I haven't tested this, so I don't know if there are certain things like interactions and animations and so on that don't transition over. I'd have to check that out. But that is an option. So if you have been working inside Webflow, you could actually copy and paste between the two if you wanted to move over to WebStudio. Like I say, have to test it out. And you see, like we just seen, the static sort of site export. But it's good to see that we've got the CMS options. So if you want to connect this up, you can do that. And you can see we can do things like create standout pages, fetch CMS data, and bind that data. Again, in a fundamentally similar fashion to what you do inside Webflow or inside something like Bricks or Elementor. But like I say, this is one of those tools that I think is a viable alternative if you want to move away from WordPress. The ability to be able to output a static if you want to, or connect it up to a multitude of different platforms like Notion, like Airtable, even to WordPress if you wanted to be able to have kind of CMS functionality and pull data in from there. It's kind of interesting. But as always, let me have your thoughts in the comment section down below. Have you tried WebStudio? Is this something you've looked at in the past but maybe written it off? Or are you actually using it? Let me know down below. And I'd love to get your feedback. And like I say, if more people want to know more about using WebStudio, let me have a comment down below and I can take a look at creating content. As always, all applicable links are in the description. And if you want to see my other recommendations, you can check out this playlist here. As always, my name is Paul C. This is WPTuts, and until next time, take care.